translates to 3 pebbles at a time.
This is hilarious.
This game really has nothing to do with what we're talking about. We'll skip it. No one cleans pools better than Marshall Pool Cleaner. If you're tired of having awful pools that always leave algae residue on your skin after a long night of swimming, then Marshall is for you. A product that suits my delicate and fragile skin. Tic-tac-toe has become a staple of cultural significance around the world. In 1876, the song Tic-tac-toe was written by George Cooper and John Rogers Thomas. In the 1970s, a legal defense team that sought to overturn the state of Florida's decision to execute a mentally ill murderer used a tic-tac-toe playing chicken as evidence. There are countless board games that share the element of trying to be the first to get a certain number of something in a row. Be sure to check out our vast library of video tutorials for them.
I hate
After all,
the Ariadne thread.
That like button. The game is simple enough. Each player takes turns marking the spaces in a 3x3 grid with an X. No, don't be fooled. The strategy can be deep beyond all reason. One ancient philosopher of great renown once quoted Abraham Lincoln, who was quoting Sun Tzu at the time, said this: "The oversimplification of tic-tac-toe has led many a country to destruction." While the greatest minds of our day claim that tic-tac-toe is a solved game, they are lying. Because after all, deception is the greatest strategy in tic-tac-toe. The game is rudimentary at its core, but once you see how deep the rabbit hole goes, you will actually find that it is but the deepest of games. However, you can't make money off of tic-tac-toe, though some have tried. Because all you need is a pen and paper, or a stick and some dirt. You can literally play this game for free. That is why the 1% establishment has poisoned your mind with the lie that tic-tac-toe is a game not worth playing. But all these other games, 3 Men's Morris, 9 Men's Morris, Pentake, Oku, Cubic, Net 4, Quattro, Goblet, Order in Chaos, Toss Away, and Mojo, and so many more, they're all simply tic-tac-toe reboots. It's all about the money on the table. Speaking of money, you should always use the link
Is it just me or is the plot different in that shop?
/Amazon whenever you buy anything off Amazon, so you can support the channel. Set it as your homepage, or bookmark it, or whatever you have to do, I don't care. But you must use it anytime you make
No, there's literally just a flame version of one of the enemies I encountered back in World 1 there.
I will get a little bit of kickback from, at no cost to you. Why wouldn't you do it? It costs you nothing, and it says thank you. So how do you win tic-tac-toe? You must get 3 of your shapes in a row.
It's still the same, and it's still 50. Cool. So this either implies that the price was 50 always for her, or that somehow she's connected with the inn people above.
Welcome back to another geology episode. How hot is Minecraft lava? I initially thought this would be impossible because of regular Minecraft inconsistencies. After all, you can take iron and you can smelt it with lava. You can then take that iron, make a bucket, hold lava in it, and then you can burn that bucket in that same lava. In real life, the temperature to smelt iron and melt steel are much higher than the normal temperatures for lava. There are some rare lavas that can be down around 500 degrees C, and one of the many strange things about these cooler lavas is that they do not glow. And this is what reminded me that there is another way to determine something's temperature, and all you have to know is the color of its light. This is because the glow of lava is entirely dependent on its temperature. Everything above absolute zero emits thermal radiation. Our bodies are doing that now, just in the infrared spectrum. Everybody is familiar with the blacksmith heating up metal to work on it. As it heats up, it will start to glow and emit light in the visible spectrum. Most of the light from fire is generated because of the same reason. The chemical reaction is generating enough heat to start glowing. You can get other colors from burning. Most people are familiar with burning a copper and a fire, and you get a green color. I know these are blue, but we can talk about that at the end of the video. And this isn't the focus of this episode, but who can pass up an opportunity to play with fire and make some cool colors? I did all of this in a fume hood, so don't try this at home. Some of these fumes can be quite toxic.
Green flame, wow. How does an egg dodge? What? We're just about to attack it and then all of a sudden the egg just suddenly rolls over or something. Could have avoided most of these lava. What
This color change is called atomic emission, and it's entirely different from the light given off purely from heat. That is called black body radiation.
Whoa!
For black body radiation, the hotter something is, the amount and color of light given off changes. This relationship is described by Planck's law, which I'll just put up on the screen now. To give a little demo, I built a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light is in the middle, infrared is on the right, and ultraviolet is on the left. As we move from right to left, the wavelength of light narrows, and as we go up on the scale, the intensity of light increases. Right now, this object is at room temperature and emitting infrared light. Not really visible on our scale over here. Let's put it on the fire. Once it's reached about 500 degrees C, it will turn this red color. The amount of light increased and the wavelength narrowed a little bit, eventually moving into the visible spectrum. This is a very wide peak, and the left side is the only part that is in the visible spectrum. As it heats up more, the peak wavelength moves more to the left, and we see more of the visible spectrum. The light is a combination of all the light produced, so it becomes this lighter orange color. Heating more, the total amount of light is continuing to increase. This is an application of calculus, by the way, my favorite field of math. If it's not yours, that's okay. It's not your fault. You probably had a horrible math teacher. To determine the total amount of light we see here, we would integrate the equation to find the area underneath this curve. Once it gets to about 6,000 degrees Kelvin, the color we see is basically white. The surface of our sun is about 5,600 degrees C, so a little bit cooler than what this is here. As it keeps heating, the peak moves more to the left, and eventually the majority of the light we see is coming from the blue section of the spectrum. There's a lot of UV light being emitted also, but we just can't see that. If we were to keep heating, the color doesn't really change much after a certain point. The amount of light will still increase, but blue will always be the dominant visible color. You may be familiar with this if you're into astronomy, because these are the colors of stars. Cool stars are red, ours is in the middle, and then hot stars are blue. Our sun emits light because it's just a big ball of hot gas. When you buy light bulbs, they're usually sold with a listing of temperature as well. Even though they're not actually that temperature, now we have other ways of making light besides make wire hot. And speaking of hot wires, I actually have an old piece of equipment called a pyrometer. If you needed to measure the temperature of something glowing and you couldn't touch it or interact with it, let's say some lava in the distance, you would look through this eyepiece, apply a current, make this wire glow until it was the same color as what you were looking at, and then you could just read the temperature off of the gauge here. Nowadays we have electronic versions of this that can measure infrared or UV and do the same thing. So now that we know the colors that are produced when something heats up, another thing we can do is plot these into a color space. If you aren't familiar with what a color space is, it's a 3D representation of a specific color model. I have a bunch of other videos talking about it. I'm going to use HSV. It has hue going around the circumference, neutral tones are down the middle, and with black on the bottom and white on top. I had some Minecraft blocks in here. As you move in towards the center, the colors get desaturated. But if we plot our black body radiation colors in here, we get something like this. The colors heat up, and then they become red, they move to orange, and then they start going across diagonally over through white, and eventually getting over into the blues here. This means that all we need to do now is know the color
That's
of
quite
Minecraft
the
lava, and
fancy
as long as
walk,
it
good
falls
sir.
on this trend, we can figure out the temperature. The lava texture file has all of the frames of animation included in it, so all I'm going to do is average those colors together, select that color, and then we actually have our hue, saturation, and brightness values right here. So I'm going to take those and convert them to the scale that we're using in our world, and we can plot it. I'll remove these other blocks so we can see things a little bit clearer. With lava plotted, we can see that it is a little bit below the temperature line, and that's fine. Its brightness isn't really that important.
Ice is
The
in the
hue and
sweetness.
saturation are the parts that matter. So now all that's left is to look at the closest data point and get the temperature, which turns out to be 1027 degrees C. That temperature is very believable and right in the middle of the range for real lava that I mentioned earlier. Let's look at that in a bit more detail and see if we can figure anything else out. Same as we did with the igneous videos, we are classifying volcanic rocks by the amount of silica in them. Felsic, intermediate, and mafic. These types of lava are associated with specific temperatures and types of volcanism. Felsic lavas have the highest silica content, and their lavas are normally around 800 to 1200 degrees C, usually less than 1000 degrees C though. These lavas
think it's
produce
chocolate
rhyolite,
for
the
weakness.
volcanic small crystal form of granite, as well as obsidian and pumice if they cool fast enough. These lavas can produce very explosive
Call
eruptions.
them back, which
Mount
is
St.
a little
Helens in the
annoying.
US produces this type of lava. Intermediate lava is a bit hotter and it forms andesite when it cools, and we're familiar with that as a block in Minecraft. Andesite was named after the Andes Mountains in South America, where
Lightning
it
and fire do
is
similar
very
damage,
common.
so
It's also found in island arc volcanics, so Mount Fuji in Japan is largely made of andesite as well. Mafic lava is the hottest of the common lavas, but it has the calmest eruptions. The lava has a low viscosity and usually flows easily. It forms basalt when it cools, and these types of eruptions are the ones you see in Hawaii. Since the Minecraft lava is 1027 degrees C, it could either be felsic or intermediate. But felsic is normally less than 1000, so maybe that means it could be an intermediate lava. Minecraft lava does form obsidian though, so maybe that means it's just a hot felsic lava. I haven't really done a video focusing on lava and magma, but when I do, I'll probably have more to say about this. So while we're talking about black body radiation, there is a few more things we can do in this episode. Like I said earlier, this works for fire, so let's look at that. If we plot Minecraft fire, it's pretty close to Minecraft lava, and in real life, a wood fire can get around 1000 degrees C, so that makes sense. The campfire plot's lower down, but the color is basically the same. Its brightness is not as high because the texture includes these darker fringes around the edges here. Normal fire seems fine. Let's check out Soul Fire. Loading it into the space, we can see it's way out past the hottest plotted temperature, which is 40,000 degrees Kelvin. Soul Fire does more damage
Yep.
than regular fire, so it makes sense that it's blue, signifying that it's a hotter temperature. But it actually has some green in it too. You can see that it's out of line with the rest of the black body radiation. We can do some wild speculation, and this could signify that this is caused by something else burning in the fire, and not just temperature. You do have to use soul sand or soul soil to make soul fire, so maybe it's something in those blocks. You can get a blue-green color from burning many different combinations of elements. I'm not really sure what colors souls burn, but they are the same color when you release them with soul speed boots though. Speculation aside, the reason the fire is blue-green is because it matches the other materials added in another update. Most new materials are grouped into a few groups of colors. Usually those color groups are also complementary to each other. This way you can pair them together and incorporate them into builds easier. And with that, we've come to the end of the episode. I've gotten my recording setup put back together after the flood, but it's still mostly an empty room, so hopefully the echo isn't too bad. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
This one's fun. That's great. Yeah, I'd invite this one to a party.
Here, as something of a personal commitment to myself, I've started drafting the facade for this thing in creative, and we're going to be bringing it into survival in upcoming episodes. I'm basically committing to this now so that you guys will hold me to it, but finally I've started drafting the shell for this entire thing, and it's going to turn it into an actual building. But that means today I need to step away from this and go and find something else to do, because this is still in the drafting process and I'm not really ready to finish it off quite yet and get it all done. So instead, we're going to go out into the world in search of a couple of Minecraft's less used but still kind of notable weapons. We're going to craft one of these at home, but the other one we need to go out in search of. We're going to spend today's episode talking about tridents and crossbows. Now, the difficulty with this is that we need to go out into the ocean in search of the drowned to get hold of a trident. They cannot be crafted and they cannot be found any other way than by fighting the drowned one-on-one in combat, and the drowned with tridents are the only ones who can drop the trident. This is at least the case in Java Edition, and I believe it's now the case in Bedrock Edition as well, although it used to be the case that drowned still had a small chance of dropping a trident, even if they weren't holding one. In Java Edition, unfortunately, we have to go out in search of trident-wielding drowned in order to acquire one for ourselves, and so for this, I brought along a sword which has the looting enchantment. Unfortunately, I've only got looting 2 on this so far, but instead of just grinding for a while to get enchanted books for looting 3, I think I'm going to head out here and chance it and hope that looting 2 will be enough. Now, in theory, the drowned can be found basically anywhere in the deep ocean. You will typically find, as you lower yourself to the ocean floor, that drowned will come out in areas where it is dark enough, and it's pretty much always dark enough down here, give or take the glow lichen and a little bit of light from magma blocks. In fact, one is rising to meet us right now, although unfortunately this guy just has a fishing rod instead of the trident with him. We got the fishing rod though, and as a rule of thumb, the equipment that the drowned hold in their left hands, usually fishing rods or nautilus shells, is more or less a guaranteed drop when you kill that drowned. However, the ones that are wielding tridents as a weapon hold them in their right hands, and at that point the odds of them dropping a trident are about the same as a zombie wielding a sword dropping the sword when you kill them. Simply put, it's not going to happen all the time. But we're going to be cruising around here until we find, there we go, a trident-wielding drowned, and at this point, I recommend bobbing and weaving, using your shield where you need to, even though the shield is looking a little bit low on durability for me, and killing the drowned as swiftly as possible. And as you saw there, unfortunately, it is not a guarantee that we get the trident from him. In this case, we just got ourselves some rotten flesh. Now, overall, it may be a little easier searching for the drowned at night than it is during the day. Not least because the drowned will spawn more frequently below the surface after the sun has set, and it's easier for them to spawn slightly closer to the surface of the water. You'll also find that areas like this, where ocean ruins have generated, are the ideal place to go hunting for the drowned, since the drowned will actually generate here when the chunks themselves generate, and typically you'll find that they stick around for a little while afterwards. These ruins aren't guaranteed to have a drowned wielding a trident in them, but it can happen fairly frequently, and at least they are more guaranteed places to find the drowned in the first place. Now, the other thing we can look for here is the chests inside of these ruins, because they will also contain treasure maps. And if we find a treasure map in one of these, yep, there we go, we should hopefully locate a buried treasure chest, which is going to give us a couple of free potions of water breathing, which we might need if we want to search for some of the subterranean levels underneath the ocean surface in order to locate a couple more drowned. It will also, frankly, give you something else to do whilst you are searching for a drowned with a trident, because if you're going out there and trying to do this intentionally, it can be a bit of a slog finding a drowned that has a trident and then finding one that will drop the trident when you kill it. We do have another one over here though, so I'm going to do my best to approach, strafing in the water as I do. We're going to take a couple of hits here and there, but there we go, another drowned with a trident has just killed that one for us. Unfortunately, I believe, oh, this one's a baby drowned with a trident, so a little bit more agile in the water here. And we have a whole horde of them approaching us right now. We have a whole horde of them approaching us right now, so I'm going to try my best to maneuver so that some of these drowned are in the way of the trident throwing one, and hopefully they'll take a little bit of additional damage from that. Unfortunately, I believe it does need to be a player kill on the drowned in order for them to have a chance to drop the trident. So if one drowned kills another with a trident, that's really not going to help matters. One final thing I will add here is that these ocean ruins will not perpetually spawn drowned. There is a misconception that these are kind of like ocean monuments, where guardians spawn frequently in that area. The same is not true of the drowned in these ocean ruins. If you spot any drowned spawning here after World's Generation, that's not some kind of mechanic tied to these structures, it's really just the natural spawning of the ocean, having to spawn the drowned somewhere. It looks like this little sandbar here is the location of our buried treasure chest, and if we haven't covered this in the series so far, now is the time to teach you the magic trick to finding these treasure chests in Java Edition, and it all has to do with your relative coordinates inside of the chunk. If we press F3 and look under the X, Y, Z, the more precise coordinates with the decimal points after them, you'll notice the block coordinates, and beside the block coordinates, a little section that is in brackets where it says 7, 14, 9. We want to line this up so that our coordinates on the X and Z axes are 9, 9, which is roughly going to be back here over by 1 block. Now we're going to dig down right here and we'll immediately find that buried treasure chest along with the potions of water breathing I was talking about. Thanks to the way that the game distributes these treasure chests, you will find every single buried treasure map you ever dig up the chest for points to a 9, 9 coordinate like this. Basically, if we were to have the chunk grid on display here, you go to the northwest corner of this chunk, you count over 9 blocks this way, and you count over 9 blocks this way, and that is where you will always find the treasure chest for one of these buried treasure maps. Anyway, now we've got some water breathing potions. We could of course have brewed them ourselves using a pufferfish back at home, but we can begin an underwater hunt for the drowned in cave layers, where you'll typically find that you're going to encounter drowned if you swim down into these darker regions. While we're down here, I've even run into some diamond ore, which I'm going to silk touch real fast, since there seems to be a decent amount of it down here. And one more piece of advice I will give you is that if you have trouble finding drowned out in the open ocean, look for a stretch of ocean or an aquifer that overlaps with a dripstone cave biome. Drowned spawning is much more frequent in dripstone caves, and it may give you the edge you need in order to find one of these trident-wielding guys. And it looks like, yes, we got one from that guy along with the Nautilus shell he was holding, so that's frankly a pretty epic victory. Now, in ideal circumstances, we actually want to get hold of 2 tridents if possible, since tridents have 2 mutually exclusive enchantments, which is to say, there are some enchantments that cannot be overlapped onto the same piece of equipment. Meaning, if we really want to get the most out of tridents in this episode, we will need to find another. And while we're on the topic, here is one other thing to be aware of. If we lure some zombies into open water, you'll notice that the zombies tend to sink, and after a while of being submersed underwater like this, they will actually transform into the drowned. As they track towards the player, you'll notice that they are shaking ever so slightly, and sooner or later, once they've stopped taking damage on these magma blocks, they will convert into the drowned and start swimming towards me a little bit faster. Now, don't be fooled into thinking that this is another opportunity to get hold of a trident. If a zombie converts into a drowned, there is no likelihood whatsoever of them holding a trident when they transform. If they are not holding a trident already when they're a zombie, they will not be equipped with it when they transform into a drowned. And so, unfortunately, it isn't possible to acquire a bunch of tridents by, let's say, waterlogging a zombie spawner and just letting
my head hurts. You know what? I'm gonna call it here.
I believe for a while that was a common technique on the Bedrock edition of the game, where any drowned would have the opportunity to drop a trident even if it wasn't equipped with one, but